Hi, I'm Jay Elfield, and I am a flock member because I know that there is so much that happens within the Our Hen House organization. It's not just the podcast, it's sharing information. It is getting to know the people who are part of the movement. And when you're a flock member, it means that you have made a decision to support the organization on a monthly basis. I've made that decision, and I know my fellow flock members have. And so that means that I get to interact with Jasmine and Mariann and Michael and the entire team on the Facebook page, and it keeps me rooted in community. I listen to the podcast every Saturday when I'm out hiking in lovely Colorado, and then I need to talk to people afterwards, even if I just need to go into the Facebook group to say, oh my God, did you listen today? And there's something about having vegan community, and I know that wherever we live, the more we're around vegans, the better we'll do for animals and the more supported we'll feel, and that's what being a flock member means. Support all the time from Our Hen House and from my fellow flock members.
Today's episode of the Our Hen House podcast is being sponsored by our partner, A Well-Fed World. A Well-Fed World is a hunger relief and animal protection organization chipping away at two of the world's most immense, unnecessary, and unconscionable forms of suffering. The suffering of people hungry from lack of food and the suffering of animals used and abused for food. Mending our unjust food system is a critical part of solving the world's most destructive and persistent problems. Fortunately, the plant-based foods that promote health and well-being are the same foods that conserve resources to better feed the world while reducing greenhouse gas emissions and protecting the environment. A well-fed world provides the means for change by empowering individuals, social justice organizations, and political decision-makers to embrace the benefits of plant-based foods and farming. Learn more at awfw.org.
Our hen house is a squawking house. Our hen house is their hen house. Our hen house, ooh, it's a funky fresh house. Our hen house is your hen house.
Happy New Year's, everybody. I'm Jasmine Singer. Should all acquaintance... You're supposed to just say your name.
It's Mariann Sullivan.
And we are excited because this fucking year is almost over. I'm excited. How do you feel?
Well, relieved that this year is almost over. A little trepidatious, is that a word? Mm-hmm. That next year could be worse. Hopeful that next year will be so much better. And I guess that sums it up.
I was about to say, what happened to indefatigable positivity? Let's be positive. I don't know. I'm pulling it out.
I had one slight moment of honesty. Sorry.
No, it's good. Honesty is good. But, anyway.
I think everybody's nervous. The world is in a very odd state. We're all scared. And that means we all have to double down, work hard, make things better.
Well, and thus we are. And that's, I love all of the guests that we've had this year on Our Hen House, and speaking of which, you have both interviews today, fancy pants that you are, two great interviews. Who are we going to be chatting with today? People who are indeed making this world a better place.
Well, first of all, I'm going to be speaking with Dr. Peter Leahy. He's a professor, but he's also a China policy specialist for Humane Society International. And he's going to, I'm excited about this conversation because I think what's going on in China is so important. And, we're talking about a lot of animals and a lot of people. And I think a lot of people have a lot of misperceptions about China and animal advocacy there and a lot of other things. So we're going to try to get to the bottom of it all.
Well, I've actually spoken with Dr. Lee before, and I think he is definitely a bright light, and I'm excited too. I think that we're going to be exploring some more global issues as they affect animal rights in the next few weeks and months. I just looked at our queued up schedule, and it seemed like that was the way things are shaping up. So I'm really excited about that. And you're also going to be speaking with Taimie Bryant.
Well, Taimie Bryant and Cheryl Leahy. Cheryl Leahy, of course, is an attorney with Compassion Over Killing, but I'm going to be talking to her in her capacity as the work she's doing at UCLA. And of course, she's doing that work with Taimie Bryant, who is a long-term professor at UCLA Law School and has a passionate advocate of animals, and they both are. And there's really exciting stuff going on there. Some really amazing programs going on. So we're going to be talking about that.
Reasons to be positive. Our guests today are three of them. And I'm in New York City. It's like oxygen. Like every time I get here, I'm just like, oh yes, this is home. It's so good to be here. I'm so excited. We're seeing a show Once on This Island, but we haven't seen it yet, so I can't talk about it. But Broadway is like my, I don't know, gasoline, I guess. It's like going to the gas station. So excited to be here. And we were just talking about intentions and just kind of what to look forward to in the new year. And I was thinking about it in the shower, as I do. And I was thinking about the fact that I wish for everybody, me, Rose, you listening, anybody who cares about this, to kind of live more consciously and more intentionally in the new year. And I'm going to get a little more specific for myself in the intention setting that I'll be putting forth for myself in the coming days as 2018 happens. But what do you think? Are people still living kind of in their own little bubble of denial about the state of the world, or have we penetrated that bubble?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I think that people are clearly still in a lot of denial about animals. There's a few little cracks in that wall, but not much. But I think that people are becoming much more political on, every side of the spectrum. People are sick of being political, but they understand that they have to be in this moment. And I think that presents opportunities for people to wake up about animals as well.
Yeah, I was with a group of people recently, and someone was saying that she was very upset. This was not like an animal rights circle at all. She was saying she was very upset. The woman talking was in her early 20s, and she said, "I'm just overreacting to everything. Like I was just on my way here, I hit a rabbit and killed them." And I just couldn't stop crying. Like I was crying and crying. I mean, clearly this isn't about the rabbit. Like clearly this is about other things in my life. And I'm sitting there listening to the story, like that poor rabbit, the rabbit's family, like as you say, Mariann, like all their little thoughts. And I really ruminated about that for a while, because why did this young woman think that it wasn't about the rabbit? At what point did she decide that rabbits are less than or othered, and that her upset was about her boyfriend breaking up with her or whatever it was? Rose is very loudly cleaning herself next to me, by the way, in case that noise is coming through. Anyway, what do you think? Are we do we get to a point when we become young adults that we push out the reality that what we're doing is actually affecting other individuals? Is that just the big question that I'm asking?
I do find that story shocking. I mean, I've just never, I mean, and you said the other people who were around totally seem to get it and understand that, but I think that most people, maybe I'm naive, I think most people would understand that was about the rabbit. I mean, she killed a rabbit. Wouldn't that upset anyone? So I find that story a little shocking.
I wonder how much, for me personally, I wonder how much violence. Rose, stop it. We're recording. I wonder how much violence I'm a part of, that I'm just attributing to my own personal woes or something. Anyway, I guess all of this is to say I want to live more consciously and more intentionally about the choices I'm making, how they affect others, and most importantly, whether they're in alignment with who I want to be in the next year and all of the other years after that. So I'd love to hear what you out there are hoping for in 2018 for yourself. So make sure that you find us on social media and let us know. You can tweet at us at Our Hen House. You're obsessed with Twitter.
Yeah, I do waste too much time on Twitter.
At Instagram, also at Our Hen House. Facebook.
I never ever look at Instagram. I don't understand it.
Okay, well.
Why does everybody want to look at pictures of other people's family and meals? I don't get it at all.
Well, thankfully you're not the one who's the point person for Our Hen House's Instagram.
Everybody's constantly telling me, "Oh, you've got to post pictures." It's beyond me. I think I'm alone in the universe on this. You don't have to write in and tell me I'm crazy. I know.
Well, if you are out there, let us know.
I secretly believe I'm the only sane one.
Well, I don't even know if you're so secret about that. You did just say it on the podcast. Anyway, I'd love to know your thoughts about 2018 and what you hope for. And if you're a flock member, weigh in on the Facebook flock page, because that's a thoughtful group of folk, thoughtful, smart group of folk out there. So let us know. The holidays just happened. It wasn't a particularly festive year on some level, but I wanted to check in with you about it, because I feel like you just mentioned this story and I found it so poignant, and I'm wondering if you would share your Jesus story with us, because Jesus was born recently and it was his birthday.
Yeah, well, this was just something that randomly occurred to me as I was thinking about Jesus. I don't know what I was thinking about, but okay. So I was thinking about the story of the loaves and the fishes, and I know that, Jasmine, that you have no idea what this story is. And please forgive me if I botch it, because I'm sure I don't know all of the details. But, I know the basic outlines, that there was some huge, big gathering of people, and there were only like a few fish and a few loaves of bread to feed them all, and they were very hungry. And Jesus asked people to start distributing this quote unquote food, and it fed the entire multitude. And this story is often trotted out as proof that Jesus wasn't vegan. It's one of the I don't know whether there are other places in the Bible where he has been reported to have been eating fish. And somebody mentioned to me that even in this story, there was no mention that he was actually eating fish. He was just distributing it. So what occurred to me is that this story was a perfect metaphor for clean meat, because these fish were, well, except for the first few, were not killed. They were created dead, and I mean, I've thought of that before, that it's kind of a weird thing. This isn't exactly non-vegan food because it was never a live animal, but it's exactly like clean meat. I mean, I think that this is just like, should be the rallying cry. Like, this clean meat is what Jesus wants. Because he invented it. Jesus invented clean, like making meat out of the cells of dead animals without making any more dead animals. Wow. What do you think? Am I onto something here? Oh, definitely. Am I going to found a religion?
Well, that one, you could be empress of the world, or at least, I don't know. I would go to church, Mariann, for sure. I think so. Yeah. I mean, I think that, like, as we know, and as we've been talking about on the podcast since the beginning of time, speaking of Jesus, or at least since 2010, the beginning of our Hen House time, clean meat or cultured meat or lab-grown meat or whatever you want to call it is really the only hope that we have. And I remember very early on, I think it was our 50th episode, interviewing Peter Singer. So this was 2010. And, he said that was a while ago. And we kind of thought it was this big science experiment. Like, this is the future. It's like far off. And now it's now. I mean, Hampton Creek.
Well, it's not quite now, but it's almost now.
Well, it's almost now. There's going to be new developments coming out on the market in 2018. So that to me is now. And that's exciting to me. And I love it. I mean, I'm an agnostic Jew. So what do I know about Jesus? But I'm down with Jesus. If he wants to be the poster child for clean meat, I'm.
Now we know how to answer that question. What would Jesus do? He would eat clean meat. Or at least distribute it to others.
Definitely. And happy holidays. We're watching Fiddler on the Roof. Speaking of the holidays, that is a depressing movie. I love it though. Oh, so good. Anyway, I mentioned rabbits before, and I mentioned the flock, and I just want to kind of remind people that our darling flock, they get access to bonus content every week. And this week, it's going to be Tracy Martin, who heads up a rabbit sanctuary, and that is called Rabbitron in Washington State. And she's phenomenal, and she's not only changing the world for rabbits, but she has some cool stories about how she was recently at like this big rabbit convention and all the food was vegan. I mean, that is so rad. So anyway, if you're a flock member, you'll get emailed that on Tuesday, or you'll also be able to access it on our flock page. Speaking of being a flock member, before we jump into the interview, I do want to remind people that we're still in end of year fundraising, and percentage wise, the last 2 days of the year are our two biggest fundraising days of the year. And we really need that to happen, because as we're recording this, we still have money left that we need to get to in order to make our $20,000. And what that means is when we reach $20,000, our barnyard benefactors then turn over another $20,000 to us, making it $40,000. But in order to get that, and in order to sort of unlock that barnyard benefactor money, we need to reach $20,000. And as we're speaking, we still have some left to raise. So please go to ourhenhouse.org, keep Vegan Indie Media alive. If you can donate $10, it becomes $20. If you could donate $50, it becomes $100. And if you could donate $100, not only does it become $200, but you become a Flock member. And I just mentioned that you get access to the Flock Facebook group. You get a Change the World for Animals sticker, which is fantastic. And you get bonus content. So check that out. And thank you again for that. By the way, I'm going to be doing news today, so that's exciting. And you're going to be interviewing Peter and Taimie and Cheryl. And I think we'll get started. Let's give the people what they want to hear.
Yeah, well, I think what they want to hear is Dr. Peter Leahy, who is an associate professor at University of Houston downtown. More relevant to us, he's a China's policy specialist for HSI, Humane Society International. And he's done a lot of research on China's animal welfare policies and the animal protection movement there, which is, of course, a vastly growing movement. And he's also published lots of articles on a really wide variety of issues regarding animals, wildlife law enforcement, human-animal relations, factory farming, animal welfare, wildlife farming, cruelty laws. He writes for Hong Kong and Beijing's English language newspapers, and he is going to tell us a lot about what's going on in China regarding animals.
Jasmine here.
And Mariann.
If you're listening to this podcast, let me start off by saying thanks. We are so grateful to you for all of the ways you have supported Our Hen House for the past 8 years.
Running a media nonprofit is no easy feat, and the many ways you keep us going means that the podcasts can keep on changing the world for animals. And that's why we're excited to let you know the great news.
Between now and the end of the year, all donations you make, however big or small, are being doubled thanks to a generous pool of donors we call our barnyard benefactors, who are ensuring that any amount we raise up to $20,000 will be doubled. Sounds amazing, right?
Well, it is totally amazing. But in order to get there, we need your support. Here's your opportunity to make a donation and double its impact.
So please, if you've thought about joining the flock or making an additional donation, or if it's just about time for you to renew your flock membership, now is the time to get the most bang out of your buck.
Now.
When?
Now.
Later?
No, now.
Go to ourhenhouse.org/donate to learn more.
The only way to keep indie media going is through supporting its efforts. In this case, Our Hen House, so that we can each have continued access to a place to find our way to change the world for animals.
That place is right here, so thank you.
Welcome to Our Hen House, Dr. Leahy.
Thank you very much for having me.
It is a pleasure to have you because, we're always eager to find out more of what's going on in China, and you are a real expert about what's going on for animals in China. And I think there are a lot of misconceptions and a lot of ignorance about China, and it's of course incredibly important. First of all, I'd like to get something out of the way, because whenever I post a lot of news on Facebook, and whenever I post something about China, I frequently get something which you could almost see as racist, that people seem to think that people in China don't care at all about animals, that there's just this culture of cruelty, and that the Chinese are just automatically going to be fine with animal cruelty. And this seems to me, it's got to be incredibly false, because I believe that people who care about animals are everywhere. But can you talk a little bit about that? Have you seen that misperception as well? And where do you think it's coming from?
Oh, yes. In the last 20 years, since I started working on animal protection issues, I have encountered countless, numerous times when people say that the Chinese people are, culturally programmed to animal cruelty, and the Chinese culture is a culture of cruelty not only to humans but also to animals. And I have to say that this comes from a misunderstanding of the Chinese people and the Chinese culture. And I always tell my audience, I say, look at me. I was born in China. I grew up in China, and I spent about one half of my time in China, and I'm an animal person. Right? So you cannot judge, the entire nation because of a small number of people, by a small number of people's actions. China does have a cultural legacy of compassion. If you look at dog meat consumption, we all know that some people in China eat dogs, eat dog meat. So the perception was the Chinese people have eaten dog meat for centuries, and dog meat consumption is a mainstream part of a mainstream Chinese food culture, and that's a wrong perception. In ancient times, more than 1,000 years ago, the Chinese people started to stop eating dog meat, and the dog meat was considered distasteful and culturally unacceptable, especially for the elites in the country. So there was a culture of compassion in the past, and the mainstream culture in China was for compassionate and caring, attention for other lives, not just the human lives. I would give you another example. In more than 1,000 years ago, a Chinese poet wrote a poem asking people not to shoot birds in springtime. And this is what he said: "I beg you to stop shooting birds in springtime because the baby birds are waiting for the safe return of the mother bird." So in other words, the poet was telling people, if you shoot a bird in springtime, you're not just killing the mother bird, you're killing all the baby birds. So this happened more than 1,000 years ago. So that's one example. Another example, which most people do not know, China in ancient times had a policy of slaughter suspension. In other words, the imperial house would order the entire nation to stop butchering animals for up to 180 days. What would be the occasion for the emperor to order a stop of slaughter? When the country was suffering from natural disasters, the emperor would say, when we are suffering, why do we want to create suffering to non-human animals? So all the slaughter has to be stopped. So when natural disaster hit the society, hit the humans. Now another occasion, the emperor would order suspension of slaughter was when the imperial family was having a festival or having a wedding or birthday celebration. So the reasoning was, if we were happy, why did we want to create sorrows, create sadness for non-human animals? So this happened in the Tang Dynasty more than 1,000 years ago, and it had been practiced in the succeeding dynasties. So that's why I say, it is wrong for us to say that the Chinese have a culture of cruelty to animals. And I would say China had in ancient times an established practice to be accepted by the society, which was vegetarianism. Now in ancient China, people did not eat that much meat. They only had meat once in a blue moon, once in a while. So the Chinese diet was mostly cereal-based, plant-based, so not a lot of meat. And also the Chinese emperors advocated mercy release, because in Tang Dynasty, for example, and since then, the imperial house, the imperial court, was composed of officials, including the emperor, who were Buddhists. So they detested killing. So they called on people to practice compassion by releasing wildlife animals back to the wild. So that's called mercy release. So this kind of practice, so vegetarianism, mercy release, and the slaughter suspension had been practiced, until today.
It's just so vital for us to remember this about Chinese culture and about other cultures as well, that compassion for animals has been there for a long time, and there are always people in every society who care about animals, and always so many people who seem not to. And we have to unite with those people who do care about animals. And I think it's so hugely important, the stories you're telling, that compassion for animals is part of Chinese culture and Chinese history, and part of the current reality in China, which I do want to talk. I want to get to talking about the current animal protection movement in China. But before that, I would like to go back and because China does have some unique challenges in animal protection and some unique issues regarding its perhaps dearth of laws regarding animal protection. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes. China is one of the, I would say, one of the top industrialized countries that does not have animal protection legislation. The only animal protection legislation China has today is the wildlife protection law, but this is mostly a conservation law, not animal protection law specifically. To be precise. Now, China is a comprehensive challenge. I have to agree in terms of animal protection, because China has the world's biggest population. Even a tiny fraction of the people who are, practicing cruelty to animals, that would be enormous number of people, right? So that's the first. China is a huge country. Second, China is a continental-sized nation. Being a continental-sized country, China has almost different kinds of, all kinds of animals in the land mass, right? China has tropical areas, areas which are close to Siberia. So you have the tigers in China, you have elephants in China. So the number of animals, that potentially can be, abused is enormous in number in China. So that's the second reason. Now, the third reason, China is the fastest growing economy, and China has the biggest, animal farming industry. China raised, billions of farm animals. China exceeded the United States in 1990 in the livestock production. So in other words, the number of animals in industrialized farming is staggering in number. And we all know that industrialized farming is problematic because of animal welfare issue and in other pollution issue, climate change issue. So that's another aspect. And the fourth aspect, I would say, challenge, in animal protection in China is that, there is a subculture. I'm not saying a mainstream culture. The subculture of wildlife eating among some people, right? So they go after exotic food, so that they think that they can eat these wildlife animals, so they have a status. So kind of a status symbol. And of course, finally, China is having expanding middle class. The total population of the middle class population in China could be about 500 million. So this enormous number of people with powerful purchasing power, they can buy a lot of stuff like ivory, like other products that come from endangered animals. So I would say yes, China is a comprehensive challenge in terms of animal protection, and also China does not have animal protection law, so that makes things even more challenging.
Yeah, and I would imagine the incredible speed with which China's economy is expanding, and people who are alive today might have lived in much more dire economic circumstances earlier in their lives, and now are much better positioned to, as you say, are joining the middle class, and are better positioned to purchase things that once were out of their realm. Would you say that this contributes to enthusiasm for meat eating in China?
Yes, absolutely. In 2007, 2009, I published an article about China's animal farming industry, and I put forward a notion called, consumption in revenge. In other words, one particular age group of people in China, they consume meat and dairy products in revenge, in compensation, to compensate themselves. So in other words, these people were denied, even basic food during Mao Zedong's years. I mean, between 1949 and 1976, when Mao Zedong was the great leader, was the leader. So these people had experience of hunger, starvation, and food deprivation. Now they have access. They can access to all kinds of food. So they say, I'm going to eat. I'm going to compensate myself. So I'm going to eat in revenge to pay for themselves. Yes. So this group of people, make campaign efforts for, say, eating less meat difficult. That's why I have been arguing in the last few years that it is easy in China to campaign for companion animal protection, but it is very hard to campaign for farm animal issues. But I have to say this. This is an older generation, people who are 55 years and older, because they lived through Mao Zedong's time of scarcity, food scarcity. But the younger generation, people who were born in the 1980s, 1990s, at the beginning of the century, so this group of people are a group of different species, different animals, I would say. So they think and they spend money very similar to young people in the United States. And these are the people who are least tolerant to cruelty to animals.
That gives us a note of hope. One thing about Chinese cuisine that you mentioned before, that there's a tradition of vegetarianism, or at least a very low meat consumption in China. And one thing that always drives me crazy, and I always ask anybody who comes on the show who knows anything about China, it's my favorite vegan food is from my favorite restaurant is Buddha Bodai in New York City's Chinatown. I love that culture of the traditional Buddhist inspired Chinese cuisine with all of the fake meats and everything. And I am always told that that's not at all the thing in China, that it's considered, it's not at all popular. And it drives me crazy that this country that has this unbelievably great tradition of delicious, delicious vegan food is not excited about it. But do you think that's the same? And do you think the same as these people? And tell me that cuisine really is not growing in China, that cuisine that I love so much.
Now, I would say, vegetarian food is growing in China. I can say that. And, the Buddhist temples in China traditionally try to lure people into eating vegetarian food by offering imitation meats, right? They do imitation fish. So it is a compromise. Even though we say, hey, why do we need to eat imitation meat? Why can't we just go to, complete vegetarian, dishes? Well, the Chinese are great masters of, Chinese are great pragmatists. They understand it would be difficult to get people to eat, vegetarian food. But if you do it creatively, by making the vegetarian food, taste like or look like, meats, then you can, introduce people gradually to vegetarian. So that was a very smart strategy. And I would say in China, vegetarian, restaurants are growing in great number. At the same time, chicken farms, for example, chicken farms and layer farms that allow the layers to walk around, free range, cage free, farming has, gathered a pace in China. So I would say yes, it is growing. But, compared with the meat eaters, with the meat offering restaurants, vegetarian restaurants are still small, yes.
Yeah, no, I understand that we're hardly there. But I'm encouraged by the fact that you're saying at least there's a beginning in that direction. But you just mentioned briefly the way animals are treated. What is the standard? Is factory farming in China exactly the same as factory farming in the States? Are there differences? How are animals treated on Chinese animal facilities?
I would say in this way, China's animal farming industry is a gigantic enterprise. It is composed of two groups. Group one, the small number, I would say about 50,000 individual units of animal farms. Now these 50,000 units are very much like factory farms in the United States, very standard, right? But the majority of China's animal farming industry, also factory farms, because you cannot do backyard farms anymore in China. So the Chinese animal farming industry is already very factory farming in organization. But the majority of the factory farms in China, the conditions are worse than the factory farms in the West.
Wow.
When I say worse, is this, a lot of those, here is the Chinese, farmers adopt, factory farming practices and instruments, but then they're put into a space which is more crowded, right? And the conditions were even worse. But they have to use all these different, say, battery cages, the installed battery cages in any conditions, like in the sheds in the middle of the field, or in bankrupt factories, and not air conditioned, or with very little climate control. The birds were in crowded condition situation, but then they use massively intervention of drugs to fight disease. So the situation is, I would say, is worse.
That is hard to believe. I didn't know it could be worse, but that's very sad. I know that we talked a little bit about, you mentioned, and I wanted to come back to, that China has a growing and vibrant animal activism movement. I don't think that most of that energy has been focused on farm animals to date, though, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But can you tell us a little bit about the animal movement there and how big it is and what its main focuses are?
Okay. Farm animal issues are one of the most difficult issues for Chinese animal protection, community, because, as I said, probably, just before I come to this question, let me just explain a little bit why, all these, farm animals in crowded conditions is in welfare undermining conditions, but there is no problem selling the meat, selling the eggs. China's meat products and egg products have potentially have a huge problem. I have to say the drug residue is very high, but the thing is that you can always find the consumers in China. It's a huge country. You cannot sell this meat to international food chain restaurants like McDonald's or Kentucky Fried Chicken. You can always sell to the supermarkets in the rural area at a much cheaper price. So you can always sell these products. So there is no problem in marketing those products. So that's why it's a difficult area for animal activists. Now, about the China's animal protection movement, it started in the early 1990s. China had its first animal protection organization, a nationally registered organization in Beijing in 1992. Since then, China has more than 500 organizations or groups, volunteer groups, sheltering operations, but about 1/3 of these are registered. So majority of the organizations are not registered, so they don't have legal status, but they are operating. Right? The major focus of these animal, groups is companion animals, the dogs and the cats. And I think, similar to, most other countries, because the dogs and the cats live with, people. So most, easily to evoke, emotional connections with these animals. Now, I want to say this. Pet keeping in China is not introduced from foreign countries. It's not a Western imposed or Western learned. I'm learning from the Western countries. No. As I said earlier, dogs were pets in ancient times in China. They were pets, they're not food. So today, there are, about 130 million dogs in China. And I would estimate about 40% of those dogs are pets and household, guard dogs. 60% of those are pets and household guard dogs. So it's a huge number of dogs in China. The bond between, humans and dogs is not Western, right? It's transcultural. Chinese people love the dogs, just like Americans love the dogs, right? So the major, effort of animal protection movement in China is, dog protection of companion animals. That's why, dog meat consumption is a hugely, dividing issue in China. There are two groups in China, over the issue of dog meat consumption. Of course, animal lovers, dog lovers. On the other hand is, the smaller number of people who hate dogs or who do not understand the importance of dogs for, people's life. So, majority of the efforts has been on, dog-related issues.
What have been some of the successes of the Chinese animal protection movement, both regarding dogs or perhaps regarding other issues as well? And perhaps, I know wildlife is also an important issue. What have Chinese animal advocates been able to accomplish?
I think they have accomplished a lot in the last 30 years, also almost 30 years. For example, in the past, governments, local governments, took draconian, approach to dogs, especially stray dogs or abandoned dogs on the streets. So they normally send the people, to kill those dogs in public, or they rounded up those dogs and sent to the mountains for them to die without the food, or they even bury them alive. So that's, in the past. Now, because of animal protection activists' protest and, petition, persistently, in the last, 15 years or so. So this kind of practice has stopped. And more local governments started to build government shelters and changed the policy regarding urban animal control, and then started to advocate, responsible pet ownership and offer, discounted, sterilization, desexing operations. And also they invite animal protection organizations to participate in policy discussion, especially when they revise the local regulations regarding, dogs and other animals. So I would say yes, they have, done a lot on changing urban animal control policy. Now, about wildlife, China has been criticized for importing illegally ivory from Africa, causing devastation of a large number of African elephants every year. About 30 individuals were poached, were killed. Now, Chinese animal protection groups protested and sent a petition to the Chinese government and talked to the delegates to the National People's Congress for them to submit legislative proposal to the government and urge the national government to stop the domestic ivory trade, so that China would stop importing ivory from Africa. And the result was, and I'm sure, of course, international pressure, was also very important. So December last year, 2016, the Chinese government announced that it would phase out domestic ivory trade by December 2017, so next month. So China would stop, domestic trade of ivory products. That was a huge, progress because of the pressure from Chinese animal protection groups and, of course, the international, community. So that's another, example. Now, I would like to give you another example about China has an industry called bear farming. More than 10,000 bears, live bears, are incarcerated in cages for the purpose of a bioextraction from an open wound cut in the stomach. So these bears suffer, daily, painful bioextraction from the open wound cut in the stomach. Now, Chinese animal protection organizations and international animal protection organizations like Animals Asia Foundation pressured the Chinese government to stop giving new licenses to, people who want to start bear farming. And there is, the industry today is totally, unpopular in China because of the, protests of the, animal protectionists in China.
Yeah, we've heard a little bit about that, and from people from Animals Asia, and I understand there has been progress on that issue. Another issue that comes up, I think, in people's minds a lot when they think of the Chinese animal protection movement is the use of animals in kind of zoo/circuses and other kind of displays that I think I recently heard that China's going to be having killer whale shows in ocean parks. This seems to be something that in the States we're gradually moving away from, and China might be moving more toward. Is that true?
Yes. There is a huge gap, I would say, in understanding of the global environmental movement among the business elites of China. If you look at the business elites in China, a lot of these people, started from very small, operation in the 1980s, and some of these people were not, well educated, but suddenly they hit, a gold mine. They became so rich in China. They had so much money. So they want to build things which they think is good, which they think that people like. For example, the ocean parks. China has so many ocean parks in China. And China has explosive expansion of wildlife parks. Many of these, organizations or businesses were owned by people who were not that, educated, who had no understanding of animal welfare, who are out of touch with the global environmental movement. So these people, started ocean parks, started wildlife parks. They want to do, animal performance, killer whale shows, and of course, for economic interest, for the purpose of making more money. Right? So yes.
It seems like there's a lot going on that's very problematic in China, but you've also indicated there's a lot of reason to hope that things could shift. And with a culture and an economy that is shifting so quickly, it seems like, and with an upcoming generation that you feel is more friendly to these ideas, we could see enormous shifts very quickly. And that's really some reason to hope. And how can people listening help that happen, help animals in China and help the animal activists in China?
I would say continue to pay attention to what's going on in China. And if people, but China, China attracts, millions of foreign visitors, every year. And I work for Humane Society International, and I handle a large number of, inquiries, emails and letters from people who just came back from China, for example. They just visited a zoo, and they want to, Humane Society International to get involved with the Chinese authorities about, certain practices which they see as, inappropriate, cruel to animals. So yeah, continue to pay attention to China. And if you are in China, you see something which you believe is, not what do you think that should be happening? Talk about it. Write essay, post it in your Facebook page, whatever, your social media, outlets. Let more people know. And also you can contact Humane Society International, and we will send the message to China. For example, regarding, animal cruelty issues in zoos and aquariums and wildlife parks, we have established a working relationship with China's China Association of Zoological Gardens. So I constantly, send the information, send the complaints, to, the association for them to convey the message to the industry. And also, for example, last year there was a bear called the saddest polar bear in the world, which was, which was kept in the shopping mall in China. And, globally, we participated in a campaign to set the polar bear free, or to move him, out of that shopping mall. Maybe people don't understand why the Chinese are so cruel. So that's what one of the argument was. The Chinese must be cruel because of the culture. See, the abuse animals everywhere. And I have to say this. Why that the polar bear and why wildlife animals are displayed in commercial venues like shopping malls? Because China has the fastest growth of electronic commerce. So people, or e-commerce, so people shop online. So they no longer go to shopping malls. So the shopping malls, in order to return, to attract shoppers back to the store, so they started to be creative, in quotation marks, to put the wildlife animals in shopping malls. So it's all because of business. That's why I say culture is not explanation for the cruelty in China against animals. It is the crude, pursuit for profit that explains a lot of the practices against animals. Yeah, let me add just one more point. China has the most robust animal protection movement in East Asia. If you look at South Korea, which also has a dog meat consumption subculture, China has a dog meat consumption subculture among small number of people, but it is in China that hundreds of thousands of people in China, young people, go to the highways to stop the trucks shipping the dogs to the slaughterhouse, and resulting in the rescue of hundreds of thousands of dogs from slaughter. So that's why I want to say China also has a huge animal protection community of more than 50 million people. If you look at this number, it's greater in number than the total population of Canada, approaching the population of England. So I would say, China has a hope in animal protection movement.
That's very, very inspiring. And I always say that the people who care about animals, we are a nation unto ourselves. Then we cover the world, and we are everywhere. And it's nice to know there's 15 million of us in China. And I just think, I like that we've come full circle to where we started off, that it's very easy to just look at things happening in China and for people to say, oh, well, the Chinese culture is just cruel. And that means you don't have to do anything about it. But it's not, there are cruel people everywhere, and there are people who are compassionate everywhere. And it sounds like you have given us hope to think that those forces of compassion are really going to have some power in China, and they could use all the help that they can get from us. As always, it's all of us everywhere who care about animals working together.
Yes.
So that's really, really important information for people to absorb. Thanks so much for sharing all of this great information. It's such an important thing for us to keep track of what's happening in China, because it's huge. There are a lot of animals there, and it's a growing cultural force in the world. So thanks so much for joining us today, Dr. Lee.
You're very welcome.
The Our Hen House podcast is brought to you in part through the generosity of Veg Invest, a venture fund providing early-stage capital and guidance to companies striving to replace the use and thereby eliminate the abuse of animals. VegInvest is part of a growing network of vegan investors helping to demonstrate to the investment world that this is the way forward to a more impactful and sustainable way of doing business. You can find out more about VegInvest at veginvesttrust.com.
Hi again, everybody. Jasmine here again, and I'm excited because I get to kind of wear both hats right now. In addition to being the co-host and co-founder here at Our Hen House, I'm also the senior editor at Veg News magazine. And so we have a very special news section for you today. And this is basically by way of vegnews.com, and it's the top 10 vegan news stories of 2017. This was from Veg News's analytics, and we have dozens and dozens and dozens of news stories that we report on each week. So these are the top 10 stories of the most popular ones that we published this year. And I'll just go in the top 10 list. The number 10 story was vegan documentary What the Health hits Netflix. And of course, in what is perhaps the most change-making vegan-themed documentary ever, What the Health debuted on Netflix this year, changing the landscape of plant-based food for good. The film, of course, explores the connections between disease and the consumption of animal products and the pharmaceutical industry. Since the release of What the Health, so many celebrities and athletes have gone vegan, including The Office actor Craig Robinson, NBA players Kyrie Irving and Jahlil Okafor, Damian Lillard and JaVale McGee, world racing champion Lewis Hamilton, musician Neo, and Real Housewives of Atlanta star Portia Williams. That movie is changing everything. Number 9, Ruby Rose urges fans to fight Trump by going vegan. On March 28th, Donald Trump signed an executive order directing the Environmental Protection Agency to overhaul former President Barack Obama's Clean Power Plan. The plan mandated that states reduce carbon emissions from existing power plants by 32% of their 2005 levels by 2030. And in the midst of a devastating move away from international cooperation toward a climate change solution, actress Ruby Rose, who you might know and love as I do from Orange is the New Black, turned to Twitter to encourage her 1.3 million followers to make the connection between animal agriculture and its negative effect on the environment. She said, quote, "Trump changes to climate today have you feeling ill? May I suggest turning vegan?" I love you, Ruby Rose. Our number 8 story, Obama says drop meat to fight climate change. Sort of on the other end of that spectrum, former President Barack Obama delivered the keynote speech at the Seed and Chips Global Food Innovation Summit in Milan, Italy, during which he discussed how meat consumption affects the environment. People aren't as familiar with the impact of cows and methane, Obama said, adding, as people want to increase more meat consumption, that in turn is spiking the growth of greenhouse emissions coming out of the agriculture sectors. Go Barack. Our number 7 story at vegnews.com, world's first 24-hour vegan drive-thru debuts in June. Canada-based vegan fast food restaurant Globally Local opened its second location in Ontario this past June, featuring the world's first vegan 24-hour drive-thru. The new eatery, which replaced a shuttered location of popular Canadian fast food chain Harvey's, serves vegan takes on fast food classics. There is literally a vegan alternative to everything. And Canada just has more and more vegan offerings every day, it seems. Number 6 story, James Cameron to release vegan documentary. Award-winning director and vegan environmentalist James Cameron executively produced forthcoming vegan documentary, The Game Changers. And let me tell you, the readers at vegnews.com, they have been emailing us and reaching out ever since. The Game Changers, which I think just debuted at Sundance, will feature a wide array of elite athletes, special operations soldiers, scientists, cultural icons, and everyday heroes who are thriving on a plant-based diet. I'm so excited about that movie. And this is coming from someone who remembers the dark days of vegan documentaries. But now it seems like every couple weeks, a brand new excellent one is coming out. Number 5, Stephen Colbert adopts vegan diet. Earlier this year, during a segment on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert featuring longtime vegan actor Woody Harrelson, Colbert announced that he has adopted a vegan diet. Caveat, he did it through losing a bet. But whatever, we'll take you, Stephen. After the public exchange, several vegan companies took action to support the comedian on his vegan journey in hopes of inspiring him to make a long-term commitment to cruelty-free living. The number 4 story, people love their bodybuilders. Vegan bodybuilders win 33 medals at 2017 Fit Games. We've had these folks on Our Hen House, actually. Vegan nonprofit bodybuilding organization Plant Built collectively won 33 medals during the 2017 Naturally Fit Games in Austin, Texas this year. And everyone who saw this story could not get enough of their gorgeous muscles and winning smiles. I love it when vegans basically infiltrate non-vegan competitions and win. And these games welcomed 1,000 total participants, and 39 of them included plant-built entrants who were challenged in various fitness events, including kettlebell, powerlifting, bodybuilding, Olympic weightlifting, and CrossFit. Who says vegans aren't strong? Number 3, fraud uncovered in Target's removal of Hampton Creek. At Veg News, one of our most buzzworthy stories this year came from food technology company Hampton Creek, known for its eggless vegan condiment Just Mayo. This summer, Hampton Creek hired an investigative team to uncover the circumstances surrounding its products being inexplicably pulled from shelves at major retailer Target. Wow, that story is truly bananas. Number 2, this is kind of hilarious. EPA cracks down on nutritional yeast. Vegans love their nooch, that's for sure. And this story nearly broke the internet when we reported on the Environmental Protection Agency's proposal of several amendments to the National Emission Standards for Hazardous Air Pollutants for the manufacturing of nutritional yeast. Meanwhile, the animal agriculture industry continues to emit more greenhouse gases than all of transportation combined. The number 1 story at vegnews.com this year was this. Haagen-Dazs debuts 4 vegan ice creams. Iconic ice cream brand Haagen-Dazs quietly introduced 4 non-dairy ice cream flavors to the market earlier this year. And we first learned about this historic move when flavors peanut butter chocolate fudge, coconut caramel, chocolate salted fudge truffle, and mocha chocolate cookie were spotted in California Target locations. Haagen-Dazs's entry into the non-dairy market followed the lead of other big-name brands such as Ben & Jerry's and Breyers, which introduced almond milk-based flavors to test markets earlier this year, also to critical acclaim. So, indeed, let's look back at all that's been accomplished and look forward to even more to come in 2018 in the world of veganism and animal rights. Our Hen House is brought to you in part through the generosity of Vistro. Vistro delivers fully prepared plant-based meals straight to your door anywhere in the U.S. They use the best organic ingredients to make handcrafted meals that are made fresh and shipped frozen to make it as convenient as possible. With Vistro, there is no chopping, cooking, or cleaning, just heat, eat, and love. And that's a win-win. Try Vistro today and get 20% off of their a la carte meals. Visit vistro.com and use code Our Hen House. That's code Our Hen House, one word, and that's vistro.com, VEESTRO.com. By the way, I love Vistro. I'm a super busy person and I have ordered Vistro many times, and every time I get home at the end of a busy day and I don't feel like cooking, it is right there and it's like somebody made this amazing meal for me throughout the day. I love it. I'm a big fan. So visit vistro.com, use code Our Hen House, and enjoy.
Next, I'm very excited to have 2 amazing women, and they're going to be discussing some new, very exciting programs at UCLA. You're really going to want to hear about these. Taimie Bryant has been teaching animal law for a really long time, and she's been doing cutting-edge research. She's really one of the pioneers of animal law. And her teaching and scholarship reflect training in both anthropology and law, and that has informed her development of the Animal Law and Policy Small Grants Program, which is at UCLA Law School. And this is just such a great idea because it's premised on the belief that in order to benefit animals with research, that lawyers have to also benefit from research in non-law fields because it doesn't stand, the law doesn't stand alone. It intersects with the work of people in other fields, and their work intersects with the work of lawyers who are actually going to come up with ways to create real change. So you're totally going to want to hear about that. And she's working with that on that with Cheryl Leahy, who's the project coordinator for the Small Grants Program. Cheryl is also general counsel for Compassion Over Killing, and she's responsible there for investigations, litigation, policy concerning farmed animals. But she's working at UCLA as well on the Small Grants Program. But she's also working with a new initiative at UCLA at the Resnick Program for Food and Law and Policy. And she's putting together these amazing roundtable discussions with people from various fields. This is really such important work, and I know you're really going to enjoy this interview. Welcome to Our Hen House, Taimie and Cheryl.
Thank you. We're so happy to be here.
Thanks for having us.
It's really a pleasure to have you because I'm pretty excited about this program. There's just so much going on in animal law and so much going on at UCLA. And of course, that has a lot to do with you, Taimie, because you are one of the pioneers of animal law. I hate to use these aging expressions, but it really is true. You've been doing this for a long time and have done amazing work at UCLA. Can you tell us a little bit about the program at UCLA Law and how it came about, and a little bit about some of the new things that are going on there?
Sure. It started... Well, my interest in teaching animal law started in 1993. At that point, the idea came from me, but right from the beginning, students expressed tremendous interest in the class and took it in large numbers. Over time, I was able to teach more specific classes, things like animal shelter law, intro to animal law and philosophy, intro to animal law and theory, and then, of course, the intro to animal law class. And then over time, we were able to expand to include Cheryl's class, actually, on agricultural animals and agricultural animal law. So we've grown on the class side, but it took us a while to get going on the programmatic side. I think it took all the work that has been happening in the field up to this point to enable our deans, the different deans that we've had, to feel like contributions to this field would be significant. And so I'm very grateful to others who were true pioneers such that we could move forward from their successes. So I'd like to tell you some of the things that are going on. We're very excited about it. In fact, just last night, the city of Los Angeles approved a partnership with UCLA Law School through which our law students will be able to be trained and then serve as hearing officers in dangerous dog and barking dog complaint proceedings.
Oh, that's very exciting. I mean, that because it's so hard to get representation in those cases and such great experience for the students.
Right. In looking into this, I learned that often these hearing officers are former animal control officers who have moved up through the ranks in order to handle these hearings. And so they bring with them all of their perspectives from field service into their hearing officer service. And that can lead to some perceptions of public safety risk that might be more exaggerated than somebody who hasn't had that experience. So we're thinking that UCLA law students will come into it without that kind of experience and will be interested in starting with a clean slate when it comes to assessing public safety versus the dog and the dog's person's interest. Another thing that we're very excited about is the initiative on animals in our food system, thanks to a gift provided by the Animal Welfare Trust. We're able to move in an exciting new direction that focuses specifically on animals in our food system. Cheryl will be talking more about that. I will be talking about the Small Grants Program. This is our first year with the program. In fact, we just finished our first funding cycle, which closed on October 15th. And we're very excited to have 22 solid applications for this. So this program is funded by a gift from Bob Barker to UCLA Law School. And we're very excited that actually the first grant that we made was to Professor Arluk, a distinguished professor who's done a lot of work on animals from a sociological perspective. And he's going to be doing work about why members of less affluent communities will resist utilizing free or low-cost spay, neuter, and other veterinary services provided to them through a Humane Society. So when I called Bob Barker to tell him that we were launching this program and that, in fact, we had made our first grant, he was so excited because, as you may recall, he urged his viewers
He's Mr. Spay Neuter.
Exactly. And so he expressed tremendous enthusiasm about the program and specifically about our first grant.
That's really exciting. Can I just ask you, when you call it a small grant, what are you talking about? What kind of grant? What is the size of the grant, and what size projects are you planning on funding with it?
Okay, so this program was actually modeled after the program run by the Williams Institute here at UCLA Law. That institute focuses on sexual orientation law. And so we, like they, wanted to use a small amount. It turns out that there are all kinds of bureaucratic rules that kick in at the $5,000 grant mark. And we wanted to stay below that. We also wanted to encourage recipients to seek funding from other sources, because part of what we're trying to do is inform not just the academic community of what they could contribute to animal law, but also inform funding institutions of exciting projects that they could fund in addition to their other interests. So the amount runs from, well, it can be any amount up to $4,500. We are interested in supporting original empirical work. And we define empirical work as original data generating work.
And this would these are awarded to people in academia?
Yes, they are. So again, what we're interested in is identifying those scholars. Actually, they identify us because Cheryl did amazing outreach to let people in other fields know about the availability of this small grants program. We want to encourage those people in academia who are doing research related to our goals in animal law. We want for those people to come to us, let their presence be known, and then we can support their work. We also want to encourage young scholars to go into research projects that will serve our goals in animal law and policy. If they find them interesting, they may continue to do work that will be very valuable to us. About 10 years ago, when I first had this idea, I went to Brad Sears, who was then the executive director of the Williams Institute, and I asked him which programs had generated the most value for the money expended on them. And the Small Grants program was right at the top of the list. So he gave me an example. He said that at the time they got started, judges were reluctant to award custody to validate foster arrangements that involve gay parents. And the perception was that they might not be as good parents as non-gay parents. So someone came forward in the academic community who was very interested in that question and did research that discovered, not surprisingly, that there wasn't a difference and that good parenting or bad parenting came from other kinds of variables. Well, then what the Williams Institute did was to take those research results and go to judicial conferences and attempt to persuade judges that they ought to think somewhat differently about the decisions they were making. The Williams Institute perspective was that judges and legislatures would be more persuaded by academic research that had not been commissioned necessarily, but that had been funded with an attempt to really understand what was going on in that area. And so that example led to some significant changes. The Williams Institute has done other spectacular work. So that's exactly what we would like to do in animal law. We would like to reach out to researchers in promising fields and offer them funding for conducting original empirical research with which we can do work here at UCLA Law School, but which can also be disseminated in a way that helps to change animal law and policy.
Yeah, I just can't think of anything more important because so much of what is done in animal law, whether it's trying to pass legislation or whether it's in litigation, it's just never been done before. And you need to give the courts and the legislatures something to hang their hat on, some reason to believe that this is the way to go. So having these research studies seems to me to be absolutely fundamental to creating legal change. And you're really reaching out to it certainly isn't just legal research. I mean, we're talking about here in virtually any field of endeavor that could affect policy changes for animals. Is that right?
That's right. We don't disqualify legal research if it's empirical. And actually, we would love to see some projects that are collaborative, including both law researchers and non-law researchers who already have identified where legal change and policy change would be effective. But we did reach out primarily to non-law fields initially. Cheryl did the most phenomenal outreach effort. One of our academic departments that we focused on was moral psychology. We're interested in how people incorporate or don't incorporate their moral values as to animals in their actual decision making. And so we contacted a number of moral psychology labs, and it bore such tremendous fruit. We have several applications from people who are working in this field already, people who are entering this field, and people who are doing really exciting work that will help us in animal law.
Like, can you give an example of what kind of things they would be looking into?
We haven't actually funded these, but yet, so we're kind of reluctant to identify specific research projects that people would do. But we do have some applications that concern theories of the gap between moral values and behavior that would seem to be logically connected to it. And so the research that will be done empirically